All right, we are back with another episode of Playing Through. I'm here with one of my good buddies, Jeff, and I'm gonna have you introduce yourself in a second. This is gonna be an awesome episode. We've known each other for a handful of years now.
Mhm.
Seems kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Um, Jeff and I met in a men's group, and I've been fortunate enough to connect with these guys and to be able to hear some of their stories. I've asked him to come on today and share his story with us. Incredible story of sobriety and um, just generational fatherhood as well. Jeff is a guy in my life who I look up to. There's a number of men that we connect with and hang out with on a regular basis, and we've taken a couple trips together. We've really grown in our relationship over the years. It's a fun, harassing relationship
Mhm.
sometimes,
Mm.
um, but just like any relationship, I have the utmost respect for you. Your honesty, your integrity, just the man that you are, the father that you are, and we'll get into all of this. And so I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us and sharing your story. But if you can give us a snapshot of who you are real quick, and then we'll get going.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I respect you as well, and what you're doing here with your podcast, and the effort to bring you know mental health and especially with men. It's such a it's so difficult for men. It seems like you know to open up and talk about issues, personal stuff. So anyway, where do you want me to start? Just
Just give us a little bit about who you are and kind of how we got to know each other, and maybe a little piece of your history, and then we'll dig into the
yeah.
history.
Well, I've been out in this area for, you know, 20 almost 20 years now, 22 years. And I'm a divorced father of three, and I'm I'm a I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's, how we met, and or you know, pretty close to how we met. And I just do life today. Um and um, I'm not sure where to
Well,
where to
let's
go
get
with
in.
this other than
Yeah, let's go.
yeah.
Let's go way back before I ever knew you. And let's talk about your sobriety
Mhm.
experience. Let's talk about, you know, life before you recognized it was a problem
Yeah,
and kind of what led to that.
yeah,
And then we can kind of go from there.
sure. Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area. My folks were very affluent. My dad was a radiologist, a medical doctor. And so I grew up kind of with a silver spoon, so to speak, Los Altos in the Bay Area. And you know, I mean, very loving household. No, weird things that you hear about. No abuse of any kind, that kind of stuff. Right? It was very loving. Um, Childhood growing up, and then I my high school years is probably where, because I was a small dude. I was a real small dude
I know
growing
the
up.
feeling.
Yeah. I grew a little bit though.
Thanks.
So, so, but I mean, I was about the smallest guy in my class for, all through high school. And I think that's one of the things that, um, s- in the back of my mind, it just, it's that confidence thing as a young, adolescent, male, and all my friends are towering over me. And, and then there's, about that time there's girls, and you start getting interested in girls. And I think I was first introduced to alcohol really in middle school, junior high we called it. And it was I think we had like a six pack between 9 guys. So it was, you know, but I managed to muscle up, I think a beer and a half, whatever. But there no big thing from that. I mean, it wasn't, you hear all kinds of stories, and I've heard all kinds of stories where, I knew right away that, alcohol did something for me. And I didn't feel that way. But it was just, over the course of my high school years, and then we started, partying, and then, you get your friend groups and the whole deal. And then it became more of where I enjoyed the effect that it gave me and the confidence that it gave me. And, I could sing and dance like, right. And, but, and there's the whole pre-party thing before we went to a party, before I went to be around, others that I maybe knew or didn't know very well. Um, it helped to get a
Get the party
few
started.
beers down, get the party started a little early. And so when you show up, you're already cruising. But, um, and it just, I think for me, I mean, high school is a tough time for young kids anyway, right? But when you get to your senior year and everyone's making plans, or most people are making plans to go off to college, and you start comparing what you're doing to what others are doing. And I didn't have those plans. I did, but it wasn't my plan. It was kind of like, hey, I just went along with it because that's what you're supposed to do.
Was it like your parents' plan or
Kind of. I mean, it wasn't like they were shoving it down my throat, but it's not something I saw for myself and had this goal and was, you know what I mean? So I just kind of went along. And my my school, it was not successful, right? I mean, I I think I went to Menlo College right out of high school, and I think they asked me not to come back. Is what happened there. Um, and then some stints in junior college and stuff. But all through this time, um, I was drinking and using other substances, and just, it was numbing the feeling of being kind of lost and not having a plan, not having any goals, um, just going through the motions day after day. And and it got kind of dark. I mean, there were some dark times where I was really, really lost. And my drinking at an earlier age, I got I mean, I drove a lot, and I didn't skip a beat when I'd been drinking. So um, I don't know how many times I drove intoxicated. I got I got caught 4 times,
the 4
4
DUIs?
DUIs. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the first was I was 20. I wasn't even 21 yet,
Okay.
and and so, but my drinking was, it was what everyone was doing. I had no idea in those years that there was anything abnormal with what I was doing. But, we did stupid stuff together, stuff that I'm, not proud of. That story for another day. But the, the, you know, getting arrested multiple times. Um, and, I served time in jail, and, minimum security county out in Milpitas, 90 days here.
Good old Elmwood.
Little Elmwood. I was in Elmwood. And, um, after the first two, so I was probably 20, 2, 3, probably about age 23, right around there, 23, I decided I wanted to go to college. I wanted to make a, you know, uh, go somewhere and do the whole college thing. My dad was all on board with that, of course. And so I went out to Colorado State in Fort Collins, CSU. And that was just, took it to another level. I mean, there's something to do every night of the week,
Kicked it into
right?
high gear.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were times when I was feeling like um it it you know I think those years I was out there for about 2.5 years, and um I had periods of time where I felt like um I was just so lost and so in such kind of a dark place, and just feeding this. It was just a ongoing, drinking every day, telling myself, in the morning, I'm not, I'm not doing this again. I'm not drinking tonight. I'm not drinking by five. I mean, whatever. I'm back with the guy because I mean, you just can't avoid it. Um, so my third DUI was out there at school, um, and a couple other run-ins with mischievous conduct kind of stuff and just stupid stuff, but um, just kind of running amok, um, and not really attending class. School was the last thing that I was focused on out there. But I came home in 1986. Um, so I got my third DUI in Colorado in the fall of 85, and came home that after that spring semester in 86, and I brought one of my buddies home with me to live, to stay for the summer.
Of course.
Big mistake, right? So we were out, you know, doing our thing, and one night, we were out and got another DUI, and um, that was the fourth one. Um, I remember when my dad found out. They were gone on a vacation for a week, and so my buddy and I had gone out, whatever, and got arrested. Spent the night in jail again, and when my folks got home, and my dad noticed the car that still didn't have the had flattened one of the tires, and I I hadn't done anything about it, so it still had that spare tire on there, and he just flew off the and and I it's like it hadn't dawned on me all of the stuff that I had done, and all of the behavior, and all of the misery and darkness that I felt along the way, all came to a head. And I remember sitting on the porch with my mom. She was standing there with me, and I just kind of realized it must be the alcohol. And it was like a light bulb. It's weird, but I just thought, I was so tired of unachieving and doing stupid stuff, and that it was almost a relief, and I that evening, we had dinner, and my dad had, gone off to process everything, and, I don't blame him. And, we sat around the dinner table, and he said, hey, there's an outpatient treatment program through El Camino Hospital in the Bay Area in Mountain View. That's where he was a radiologist. And I just said, yeah, I'll do it. And it was an outpatient, so it wasn't like I had to go stay anywhere, but it was Monday through Friday, I believe, all afternoon, maybe 5 hours, something like that. And that was my first introduction to um, alcoholism and everything around it. Um, and Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that. So that was kind of the start of my two-phase recovery. At a
Yeah, so sticking with this one first. So when you look back on that, you're still pretty young
Yeah,
at that
I
point.
was 24.
So if you look back and reflect on that, like a lot of that can just be attributed to being a stupid kid and getting caught up in the party lifestyle of high school and college. Most people can resonate with that. But is there anything in that period that you'd look at your mental health and be like, "Hey, I wasn't firing," like you talk about it was a dark time and lack of motivation and lack of maybe success, but was there anything else going on or like triggers that were causing you to drink at that point, or was it just straight up partying?
It was pretty much I mean, it was straight up partying, but I didn't have I didn't feel like I had anything else that was driving me, as far as goals or ambitions or I was caught up in it. And it was, a lot of it was remorse, guilt that you just kind of perpetuates the cycle of not wanting to feel it. And alcohol made it feel better. And so, but I was thinking about the mental health part of that period of time. And there was one occasion in particular that I had been out all night. um I was coming home. At the time I was living at my parents' house, and the sun was coming up, and I was on my way home, and I was out on Highway 280 in the Bay Area, and I was getting close to the exit, and I just pulled over. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I I got out of the car and I walked all the way to the house. I mean, this is just not rational
Right.
thinking, right? And I thought, and I'm concocting this story in my head about where I've been, what's going on. But this wasn't, this isn't the only time. This is just one that came to my mind. But it's this kind of, um, it's insanity, is what it is. It's a level of insanity induced by just repeatedly, you know, drinking and masking um, really going on.
Yeah, and I think I can relate to what you're saying. I think I've been there drinking. I've done my fair share of partying, but my mom committed suicide through alcohol. And so, I was able to see the cognitive recline that she had because of the substance, right? It's that the chemical reaction that alcohol has on the brain and the body essentially puts you in a trance, where you're not thinking straight, your reaction times are obviously lacking, and your decision making is poor. Um, but it's kind of it's kind of one of those things where it's like most people they don't really correlate the mental health side to alcoholism, to maybe drugs a little bit more than alcohol, just because
Mhm.
a lot of people drink alcohol. Not a lot of people do. Not, you know,
Mhm.
hopefully
Sure.
less people do drugs than
Right.
alcohol. But that's becoming the norm as well, right? And so, um, I don't discredit it, but it doesn't have to be like a specific thing. It's just I was just curious because at a young age, like you're influential by other people, by your surroundings. And so Let's go to the second. You said that was the first phase. How about the second phase?
Yeah, so I got sober, and I that was my first introduction to AA.
So you did go to AA?
I did.
Okay, not just the outpatient. Or
That's
was
right.
that
That so the outpatient was I think it was about 30 days, 4 weeks. And then from there I went right to
okay?
the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And and so and I was very active for probably 5 years. Now when I say active, I went to a lot of meetings. I had kind of a group of friends that we hung out with and went to meetings with and went to different meetings with and did stuff outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. But um, there's a program of Alcoholics Anonymous that there's work to be done. Trust in God, clean house, and help others is basically the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in a nutshell, right? Um, but I did get a sponsor in the early days of my sobriety. So when I say two phases, I had two stints of sobriety, um, and but I didn't complete all of that step work. So I didn't do the work. Um, I didn't clean house, so to speak, right? So you take a personal inventory. You write all that stuff down. You analyze it with a sponsor who's been through experience going through the steps and stuff. So, um, I did the first three, but I didn't get into the hard work, right? So, but you can being around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and having friends, it gets you out of the other, the people that you're hanging out with that maybe weren't, influencing you, uh, in a negative way. But so I was sober for 5 years going to meetings, and then I kind of stopped going to meetings, and I had one of the points I want to make is having to do with your spiritual condition. When you're in recovery, your spiritual condition is huge. Um, and once I stopped going to meetings, I didn't really have a spiritual condition that I was working on, other than just being in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and hanging out with a group of sober friends.
So no church or anything like that at this
Not
point.
at that time,
Okay.
no. Um, and so when I kind of stepped back from AA, I I slowly started kind of connecting with my and these were friends that I'd known for years, right? These are friends from middle school, junior high school, and high school. Some really close friends, right? And um, and I completely distanced myself from them during my sobriety period of time. But after 5 years or so, it's probably 30, 29, 30. Um, I started kind of reconnecting with them. And and then, it's cunning and baffling, dude. The you know, alcoholism, the alcoholic mind, um, the drug addict mind is very manipulative, crafty, and so long story short, I picked up a drink. I had completely justified in my mind. So this wasn't like, you know, one day I just happened to, this is like something I'd been thinking about for probably, several months, and gave myself permission. I actually had lunch with my mom and dad and told them, that, hey, I'm all grown up now. Right. It was like one of
I've
those,
got
like,
this.
yeah, but I was healthy. I was like, I was riding and running, and I was probably the most fit I'd ever been. I'd lost all that weight, all the, Domino's pizza and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and
Not to mention the sugar from the
fear weight
alcohol.
and the sugar and everything else. Yeah. So I was feeling, real good. And so and that's the cunning and baffling part. It's like, I lost, I, I, I lost touch with the reason why I got sober in the first place and all the misery and all the stuff I went through when I was younger. But so that started so that was, you can call it a 12-year relapse.
Okay.
And so, and it started out, um, pretty innocent. And I made a conscious effort to control, have a couple beers, have a couple,
And that worked for a while?
and it worked for a while. Um, but, when it was on, it was on. And when the situation was right and the certain friends were there, it, and, so, but during those 12 years, I met my ex-wife now, but I met my wife at the time on an occasion where I never would have been if I'd, been sober, because this was like a drunken backpacking trip in Point Reyes
Okay.
with, you know,
What could go wrong?
yeah, with a bunch of my boys and a couple gals, and I knew everybody except um, Nancy, and she knew everybody except me, and that's where we met on that trip. And long story short, we got married and raised a family together. My three kids. So I would never trade um, flush of emotion. I
Right.
would never trade those years of going back, and it wasn't like I wasn't the juvenile alcoholic. I was the adult alcoholic, right? So I had responsibilities. I care, I had a job. I was the income, you know, um, income producer. Nancy didn't work, raised our kids and that whole thing. But there were nights when, there was a night I worked over in Scotts Valley early in our marriage, and we had Lindsay, our first, and there was one night I didn't come home. Just
Smart.
yeah. And when I look back on some of this stuff, it's you know, it amazes me that my behavior and thinking and whatever. But when we were over in Santa Cruz, and what happens is when it rains, Highway 17, there's accidents, and there was no way to get back over the hill at that time unless I went 4 hours out of my way. But so that was the excuse. We went to a bar and tied one on and ended up getting a hotel room, and I didn't call. But so and there were some other things that came into play during that time. There was my relationship with my ex-wife started to break down a little bit, and she started questioning, because my sister is also sober. And so she would tell my wife at the time, Jeff shouldn't be. He shouldn't be. He's an alcoholic. Um, so it got to a point where I was really kind of self-medicating my marriage, and and then I found another substance that I was never interested in, but um, pills. It was Vicodin, and it was just on a occasion of of a uh, a physical thing where you know, she had a jug of it. Uh, yeah, she had migraines, but and it's just one of those, and
Were you mixing it with the alcohol
uh-huh,
too? Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, and I just for there was a period of time that I was doing really self medicating because I felt like in my marriage that um, there were just challenges, and on both sides. I think I was not. I don't know where she thought I was, but I couldn't have been the man that I needed to be in that marriage, um, doing the things that I was doing, and and it just it eventually came to a head, and so we had a discussion. This was in 2005, probably, and we had moved out here in 2003. We'd moved out to El Dorado Hills, and and so we talked about it, and she was really, you know, pushing me to stop drinking. And I remember telling her, I said, if I do this, I know what to do. I know how to do it. Um, I didn't want to do it necessarily, but I felt like I needed to. And but I told her things are going to be different because our relationship where we, drink when we first met, it was a fun, having drinks and doing, fun stuff together. So me not drinking is going to change dynamic, right? So I explained that to her. Well, it took me a little while to get stopped the second time. Number one, I didn't really want to, and number two, I just I didn't want to let it go. But towards the end of that period of time, it was like we'd go down to Lake Tulloch, right, not far from here, and her parents, my in-laws, had a house right on the lake, so it was a fun place to go and vacation. And there were times in the summer, I mean, we go down like 4 times a year, and there were times when I was getting so, like, eagle-eyed, you know, with the drinking that, um and it would be just, 1 or 2, and I couldn't stand that. So, it was, uh it was, uh it was frustrating. So, anyway, there was, a couple times where she would, we'd have a week planned, and I wouldn't be able to get off work. I'd be like, I can't go this time because, but that would give me a
You're starting
week.
to make a cognitive effort to step away from it.
No, I was letting them go on vacation, and I was staying home so I could freely
Got it. Okay.
do my thing.
Got it.
So, I'd watch a Giants game,
Tie one
drink
up.
a bunch of beers, and then I'd head off somewhere, you know, um, and, sit in a bar somewhere. And, you step down on rungs of the ladder as you progress, and as you have to isolate, and as you have to manipulate and hide what you're doing to be able to do what
So what was the tipping point at this point then that pushed you into sobriety?
you I had gone to some meetings. Um I just was kind of 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out for a while, and I would drink some, and I would go. And there was 1 week that Nancy took the kids down to Tulloch. I stayed back, and she happened to call one night, and I was, pretty lit up. And I just remember that phone call because there were periods of silence where, and I got this ringing in my ear because I'm so, intoxicated. And I was afraid if I said anything, she would be able to tell, you know, and uh, that was July 13th of 2006
Okay.
when I
So
had that phone call, the evening of July 13th. And so the 14th of July in 2006 is my first day of my sobriety. So we're
and what did that path, so from on the 14th, what does that look like? That's back in AA, or is
Yeah.
that like your rock bottom moment and it's just like
Uh,
pedal to the metal from
it
there?
it was the definitive decision for me. That's when I flipped the switch and didn't look back. That's when I knew where I needed to go. I knew what I needed to do because I'd been there and done it. Um, it wasn't as easy the second time around, like I've mentioned, but
Because you're actually gonna do the work this time.
because because I, it was hard to let it go. It was, I enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the misery. I didn't enjoy the hiding and the guilt and and the remorse and the hangovers, dude. Oh God, the older you get, brutal. But so I started making an effort and getting to a lot of meetings, and I went down to meeting on Wool Street in Folsom, Monday night big book study, and that became my home group meeting that I didn't miss for probably 8 years. Um, and I got my sponsor in that from that home group, and but I mean, I went to meetings all over the place. I'd go with friends that, a friend had a chair a meeting in Davis. I'd go with him. We'd go to meetings in Placerville, all over the place. I was going to sometimes, go to a noon meeting and then go to a meeting that night. I mean, I just dove into it. And that's, when you're early on, that's kind of what it takes. You just have to dive in. And so I got a sponsor and we started going through the steps, you know. So um, I'd done the first three. Um, so we went through those again. And then, I took that personal inventory and wrote everything out, Um, and and then I got together with my sponsor and we just drove around in his car. I mean, everything, but every situation is probably different. But he just said hop in, and we drove around, and I just started reading it, and so got through, got through all that, and just then continued to work through the steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, um, and making amends, um, being willing, to make those amends because some of them aren't easy. Um, but the freedom that comes with that. So this is the work
Good. I mean,
that I'm talking about.
and that's the thing. Like I can see the emotion. The cool thing with you is the emotion side because it's this is why we're doing what we're doing is because it's not easy for guys to talk about it. You know, and it's not easy for women to talk about it. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, yeah,
They're just built different than us, right?
yeah,
It's if you would have said that I'd be sitting here, sitting across from you, doing this right now, and we met, 3, 4 years ago, whatever that is. If we would have said that when we first, like, there's no
yeah,
shot,
yeah,
like zero.
yeah.
But I feel like when we finally get honest, when we finally humble ourselves and put our pride behind us, right, or at least alongside us, because pride's always going to be there. But you channel it in a different way. I think that helps. And when people are open about, their emotions and not afraid to show it, that's where real change comes. Not only for
Mhm,
yourself,
mhm.
but for people like this that are going to be listening to this, right?
Yeah.
For people, it gives people permission to say, "Okay, I can do it." It's like AA where you grab a sponsor. Like you're as a sponsor, you're giving somebody permission to recover as well.
Sure.
It's not just about them in that moment, it's also for you. It's also the giving back, helping others, right? And and so I don't know personally how hard it is. I know how, I forced my mom into recovery. Um I had to kick her the cops, it was so bad for a while that the cops would call me on my personal phone because my mom had called 911 and, thing whatever she said or whatever's going on, to the point where they wouldn't kick in her door anymore. So, I was working undercover at the time, so I would take off from whatever I was doing. I'd go home, I'd kick in her door, and then pick her up off the floor, put her back in bed, yell at her for, probably 5, 10 minutes, and then leave frustrated. Finally, the last straw for me was, it was a terrible night. And I just told her, I go, hey, you know what? I'm done. I can't, I can't do this. I don't blame you. I had just gotten married, in 2009. My dad left her, 2 months after we got married. And then my younger brother moved out of the house. And so she's in this big house all by herself, and then her job severanced her to retirement. So she was left with nothing, right? And so after all this and all these, things happened, um, she was done. I knew she was, but she loved her grandkids. And I just told her, I go, "Hey, you're done with the grandkids. I can't have you around them in this state of mind. Like, I can smell the alcohol, I can see it. You she could hide it from my brother and some other people, but I'm also a drug recognition expert at work, right? So this
Mhm.
is my job. This is what I have
Mhm.
to do. And I'm like, I can just look at your pupils and tell,
Yeah.
you know? And so I told her, I go, hey, that's it. Either you go to rehab or I'm out of your life. I can't do it anymore. So she went to rehab, but you can't force somebody to go.
Mm-mm.
And we'll talk about that in a second.
Mhm.
Um, that's why I'm sharing this is
Yeah.
because I forced her in there. She went to please me, right? But she didn't do the work. She didn't let that happen. And she had so many demons to battle that weren't her doing. And my heart breaks for her and to the point where she ended up, using alcohol to commit suicide. And and so that's why this topic's so heavy for me because I'm like, this is so common, and a lot of people don't even know they struggle with it. Or
Mhm.
maybe they know, but they don't wanna, face it. They wanna keep masking it and hiding it because they're functioning alcoholic.
That's right.
And
It's their
so
solution.
exactly. Um, so that takes me to this next portion that I think is as important as your story is for your personal level, you also have experience, um, with your child. And I think that that is carries even more weight in my opinion,
Mhm.
because 'cause I've been able to kind of walk alongside you with that and just kinda
Mhm.
see the updates, see things
Mhm.
going from the absolute trenches, right, to the peaks, to back to the trench a little bit, but to the peak. And so, if you're open to sharing about your daughter, I think that'd be
Sure.
beneficial for us, so
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, well, one of my 3 kids, my middle daughter, uh, so, being a sober alcoholic, right, and having kids, you kind of observe that as they're growing up, and, um, there were times early on, high school years where, my girls I have 2 girls and a boy, and all 3 of them have been guilty of this, but, we all have, but, you know, there were signs, and I just kinda I just kinda bank, a, a situation and think, "Okay, it's interesting." And, but when we took Cameron to ASU, she went out to ASU, and when we took her out there, um, that was where and I've had a chance to have some really heart to heart, honest conversations with her, which is just a blessing because she held me at a distance throughout her drinking, and and so there were definite signs. And she lived with her mom for a while after, so she was out at ASU and then came back, and her drinking was affecting her progress with school and with her. Um, she wants to go into nursing, and brilliant. She's so smart. Um, but she got sidelined because of her experience with alcohol and what it was doing uh, to her. And she got into some real dark periods as well. And her mom would, you know, finally reach out to me and say, "Hey, you know, I'm worried about Cameron," and you know, explain what's going on. I just thought, okay, yeah. Um, so you know, I'd reach out to fellow alcoholics, friends of mine that are in the program, and you know, get some guidance and just talk about it and how to handle it and what to do because you hit it on the nail. It's like you don't have any control over somebody else. And the closer they are to you, the more painful it is. Um, and it's like alcoholism is the only disease that I know of. And I don't like to call it a disease. I call it more of an allergy. Um, but it's the only ailment, you know, that has to be self-diagnosed. You know, if you have cancer and the doctor can say, look, you know, you have cancer, here it is, then, you know, it's pretty widely
Right.
accepted, right? If somebody's not really ready to hear
I could
that,
tell you you're an alcoholic all day long. That's not gonna
yeah,
if it doesn't
you've
resonate
got a
with
drinking
you.
problem. You need to look at this. It's not going to register, you know, unless that person has to make that decision for themselves. So, yeah, this was a tough one because she, at one point, after a pretty dark period, made a decision. She called me one afternoon and said, "Hey, Dad, I'd like to come and move in with you. You know, accountability. You know, I want to, you know, stop drinking, that kind of thing." And so that's music to my ears. And I'm thinking, okay, awesome. Well, she had all of her stuff in her car when she called me, so she was already on the way. And so she came and she lived with me for about 2.5, 3 months. And I brought her to a couple meetings. I could tell she wasn't ready. She hadn't made that, you know, to her, it was a break. She was taking a break from alcohol, which is in and of itself,
Right.
yeah, not a normal thing, which she came to realize later. But yeah, so I just had a long talk with her. She said, I'm going to move back in with mom. And I just, yeah, she's not ready. And I had to let that go because, and just pray that where whatever it takes for her to reach that decision is not going to come with a bunch of nasty baggage
Right.
or injury or you know what I mean. So she went back, moved in with her mom, and you know, I was back kind of held at bay and just a real kind of felt like a fairly superficial relationship with her um and and then I got a text one night. Um, it was a weeknight. I forget that what night it was, but um, it was a text from her mom. It said, "Hey," and I just happened to. It was 12:30 at night, and
Pretty late for you.
very late for me. And I already slept like 3 hours, so I looked at my phone and it said, "Cameron has totaled her car and was arrested for drunk driving, DUI." And I think I laid awake, or I called her to get some details and laid awake for till 3 in the morning. Probably got a couple hours. And uh, I somehow got the day off where I don't remember. It was a blur, but we went and picked her up from Placer County. And it was just the worst, you know, it's the worst thing. She had run into somebody on Highway 50 So there was an injury report that was filed. So she had been booked on a felony DUI. And so we just, went into a plan of action. And for her, she, she wasn't, that scared her. That didn't convince her necessarily.
Well, because
So
she ended up doing a little bit of time.
she did.
Did
And
like
she,
10
she,
to
she
30
did 12
days? 12,
days,
okay, yeah.
12 days. Yeah. Um, but she drank up until
Right,
the time she had to go in and serve
right.
that time. And I just, I understood it, but I didn't understand it. My sober self didn't understand it, but you know, the human side of this disease, this, alcoholism, understood it. So,
So
yeah.
what was her point? Because she kind of well, so she goes into custody, she contacts you in custody, right? Didn't you go and see her? Am I missing
Well,
that?
we went and picked her up the night that she was the next morning that she was arrested, and then we had some court appearances, the whole deal. So think about this. Yeah, I think I don't believe she stopped drinking until she had to report.
Right,
So she drank throughout the court proceedings, and which took a few months.
right.
Um,
But when she was in custody, I think I remember she had, like, an aha moment while she was in there, right? Was that the time?
yeah, well, yes, from what I remember, yes. I mean, she had come to terms with the fact that she was gonna stop drinking, that she had to stop drinking because of what happened, and it scared her, and she started, you know, um, looking back and realizing that all this, things that she had been doing and her behavior and the spiraling and the isolating and nightly drinking herself to sleep, kind of thing. Um, but she hadn't been to any AA meetings yet until I believe, and I may misspeak here on this, but until she got out of her, um, incarcerated period. She did go to a couple meetings in there. The H&I, person came in. She attended those, but she, when she was ready, when she was out and had moved in with me, we went right back to that same meeting I took her to 2 years prior. And a dear friend of mine that has been in the program for many years um, had asked her 2 years prior, "Hey, are you ready to do this deal?" And kind of wasn't her response. And then same gal came up and talked to her, and yeah, I'm ready. She took her through the 12 steps, did her work, made amends to me, and as part of her amends, um, and you know that started her sober journey. And she had a little hiccup at 9 months, and scared her. It was a situation that made her, like, is there any doubt? Now, is there any?
Right.
It was one of those
A
things
confirmation
where
moment.
it was a confirmation moment for her, and it was just like, holy crap, because it was one slip up, and it took her to a place that not arrested, not back in jail, not not driving, anything like that, but it was a scary moment. So, but so she's a blessing, dude. She's her sober self is just she's so smart and so fun and so funny and so caring. It's just wonderful to see anybody sober up, anybody get get sober and change their life and live in sobriety and do the work. my daughter.
Yeah, when it's your kid, and that's
Yeah,
kinda how God looks at us too, right? I
yeah.
mean, for everybody and people listening, like, you're created for a reason, you have purpose, and alcohol, drugs, any type of an addiction is gonna pull you away from that purpose, gonna disconnect
Mhm.
you from God, and you're worth it, I say that all the time here, like, you are worth it, and to be able to check yourself, do the work, and get your you know, we all make mistakes no matter what those mistakes are, and you can always bounce back. It's you gotta sometimes eat that humble pie
Mhm.
and make amends. I guess that's the right
Mhm.
term for it. Um, but, it's doable. You're never too far gone. The only time you're too far gone is when you're in the grave, even if someone gets hurt from it or whatever, like, as terrible as that is, you can still get yourself back on track. And, you know, even when I think with alcohol and drugs, a lot of people give up on those people, kind of how I was with my mom. Like, I'm done. Like, I can't do it. That's when you got to pull those bootstraps up. And that's where you have to take charge and it has to be your decision to
Yeah,
to get clean.
yeah.
Looking back on all of this, what is some advice that you would give someone that's struggling with this right now? Like, they're listening to this and they're at that acknowledgement point, or maybe they're not even at that acknowledgement point. Maybe they're listening to this for some other reason just because, they stumbled upon it or, we asked them to listen to it. Like, what's your advice for someone in in the trenches right now?
Oh man, it feels kind of almost cliche-ish, but you're not alone with how you're feeling, what you're doing, um, and I was in a AA meeting Monday night that I go to pretty regularly, and the beginning of this meeting, and I just kind of sat around and observed this. But in the beginning of the meeting, everybody introduces themselves. Just every meeting's different, but this one is you just go through around the room,
I
and
have to ask, is it the cliche?
n- no,
Is
no,
there is it the whole title and everything? Is that
no, no. The cliche was you're not alone. That's what I'm thinking. You're not
but I'm
alone.
saying when you're in these meetings, is it, "Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm an alcoholic." Is that how it actually goes?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And every meeting is different, but this one just starts at one corner of the room, and everybody just one after another weaves through all the rows and chairs, and there's probably 60 people in this meeting, maybe more sometimes, and it's one person after another, introducing themselves. Boom, 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 boom. And I just thought, a lot of alcoholics.
Yeah.
And that's one meeting on one night,
In one
you know,
city.
in one city. And, this was a Monday night. Uh, there's probably 10 meetings in Folsom on Monday night.
Oh,
And they're all times of the day. There's meetings in the morning, there's meetings at noon, there's meetings in the afternoon, and there's a whole bunch of them at night. And they're all different. Um, there's meetings where you have a chairperson that talks for 20 minutes and then it's open up for discussion. There's speaker meetings where one person tells their story for 40 minutes. Um, there's all different kinds of structure, and um, but back to your question. God, you just got to put your hand out.
so when you say put your hand out, like, accept that other hand that's gonna enter there and
You
help
got
you
to
through it?
put your hand out and ask for help.
Yeah.
You got to ask for help because help's there. It's there.
And you're not a burden, right? I mean, that's the biggest
No,
thing is I think
you're
people feel like
welcome.
they're a
Like, I
burden.
mean, it's unreal the love and acceptance in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Awesome. What is looking ahead now, what is your vision for the rest of your life in recovery, and what are you most grateful for today?
Oh man, my relationship with God. Um, most grateful for. My relationship with God and my sobriety and the free gift of salvation.
Awesome.
Um, and just having that change, that heart change that that I found. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fantastic starting point, you know. For me, after several years of being just deep, tied into AA, I wanted to find out more about this God person that is all through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and all over the walls on the steps, traditions. And so that brought me, my desire to know more about that, uh, brought me more to God in my relationship. And that's how you and I met
Yeah.
is through our walk,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
And a good stogie.
and a good cigar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's one thing you want every listener to walk away with from your story?
Oh man. Um, uh, um, you said it earlier. You're worth it, and as far down a rabbit hole that you are, as guilty and remorseful as you feel, there's forgiveness for you, and um, like kind of like you said too. It's oh man, I don't know. It just you know it's better. It's better. It gets better. You just have to put your hand out and it's scary. It is. It's scary and you think you're the worst of them, but trust me, you're not.
You just got to
Yeah.
be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
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 So, for anybody listening, if they identify they have a problem, they want to get some help, how can they get involved in AA? Is there like a general?
So you could literally you can Google Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all over the internet. So there's a hotline number, there's a phone number you can call. There is a meeting schedule, and like I said, there's meetings every city and every state, multiple times a day. Um, just get yourself there. Pick up that phone, get yourself to a meeting, and just listen and put your hand out and just just sit and listen and look for the similarities in what you're hearing.
Yeah.
um it's there, man. It's widespread. I know people. I haven't had I've gone to meetings in other states, but I know people that have gone to meetings in Spain and France and all over the place, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Blessed to have you here.
You're welcome, man.
It's not easy to share your story, but it's needed for other people to hear it.
Yeah.
Um, and so for anybody watching or listening, like you said, find out if you need to get into AA, figure out how to do that. If you need help doing that, you can hit us up at on email, contact@playingthroughpod.com. Shoot us a message on Instagram, playing through pod. If you need to get a hold of it, we'll help you do that. Figure it out. Just if you need someone to help, we're here to help. We have a ton of resources. If we don't have those resources, we will put you in touch with those resources. Again, thanks for having you join us. And
Yeah.
it's a little warm in here, so we're gonna get out of here.
Right on.
Kinda used, and I know you'll make me new. I'm playing through the storm, and and I pray this ain't the norm. Your grace is true to form, your mercy I want